and welcome back, and today we're working on the mini Centurion, which I'm thinking we can get finished in time for VCF. Who am I kidding? I'm filming this intro completely out of order. You saw the thumbnail. There's no reason for me to be sitting next to the genuine one because the miniature one is finished. So I'm gonna grab my chair, move over to there, and let's try this intro one more time. Hello and welcome back, and today we're working on the mini Centurion, or the CPU-46, and well, we're not really working on it because it's finished. It's ready to go to VCF. Oh man, this was an absolute thrash to get it to this point, and I'm just barely slipping in under the wire because VCF is extremely close. It's like less than a week away, and I have to drive 3 days to get there. So, I just barely got it done in time. And I think it's gonna fit into the back of our SUV just fine. I measured it, it is exactly 33 inches tall, and our SUV has a opening of like 33¼ inch. So we have like a quarter inch or like a centimeter of clearance to get that thing into the back. So it's gonna be interesting getting it up there, but we are going to get this machine up to VCF East. So if you're in the Northeast region, VCF East is happening on the 14th, 15th, and 16th, and this machine is going to be there, as well as the weighing rider. I'm gonna take that with me, and I think I'm gonna try and stuff a few other smaller things in there so I can put them up on the table. I'll also be participating in a streamers or YouTubers round table talk on Friday from I think 3 to 5. So if you're in the region and you can get there on a Friday, definitely come check out the talk. If not, I think that talk will be live streamed. Anyways, if you are not in the Northeast, which I know a lot of y'all aren't, I'm gonna go through and kind of give you guys a full walk around of what this thing is, how to properly use it, and I think I'll answer some frequently asked questions that I get, and I might actually get at the event as well. But before we get into all of that, I want to show you guys what it took to get this machine to this point. Now, instead of my usual filming style where I set the camera up and I do one thing and then I move the camera and I do the next thing, I just didn't have time to film it that way because it was an absolute time crunch. So instead I just set the GoPro up and put it on time lapse and hoped that it captured all of the work it took to get it to this point. So after the time lapse is over, we'll pull the panel off and take a look at the inside at what we actually built in more detail. So, well, let's get down to work, I guess. The work all finished already, so let's get down to watching the work. And that brings us up to this point, and it looks gorgeous. I am absolutely in love with how it turned out, but there's a lot of things that didn't turn out so well. The vinyl that I'm using to cover up the MDF and look like the actual wood grain of the real system is, first of all, a little too red. You can't notice it unless I wheel this over next to the genuine system, but also it's vinyl, and it didn't stick very well to the MDF, which I suppose is not unexpected. This was kind of meant to stick to metal or plastic, so putting it on MDF, wasn't expecting the best adhesion there, but it's not great. And I also wasn't perfect in trimming up all of the edges. So I think after VCF, we'll rip all the vinyl off, which is fine. We can do that since there's MDF underneath it. And we'll try to hunt down some proper genuine wood veneer, kind of like how the original Centurion did it. And we'll get that glued on and trimmed up properly, so that way it looks like the real deal. The other big issue that we have is this front panel. Getting it built was not trivial in the slightest, and we've got it built and mounted and it's looking pretty good, but I made a pretty big mistake. I measured where these LEDs go, and they're off by 1 row. I don't know how I messed that up. So these LEDs should all be shifted over exactly 1 row, which means that these buttons should also be shifted over a little bit, and that key should also be shifted over a little bit. Once I realized that I'd had the LEDs in the wrong position, I kind of made compromises to try and balance everything out. So I'm not gonna go through the trouble of putting stickers and the Centurion logo on here right now because, well, this whole front panel has to get remade. And if I'm remaking it, there's 2 things that I wanna tackle. The original CPU4 system that was in the short cabinet like this didn't have this CPU6 style front panel. Instead, they had all the LEDs laid out in a line on the bottom, which I think looks awesome because then you get your full 16-bit address in a line. And I think it might actually be a little easier to read, even though this is really mostly just for show. Also, the color is just, I can't get it to match. I repainted this front panel twice and it's close, but it's just not there. So I need to find someplace that can mix up a custom color of paint that exactly matches the existing colors here, so that way the front panel will match perfectly. This is not a surprising problem. This paint is just automotive paint that Centurion found at the store down the street. And actually, I think it's even more complicated than that because these panels came off the counterfeit system. So this was somebody else trying to match the color of paint that Centurion got from the automotive store down the street, who just mixed it up on a whim in the 70s. So we need somebody that's really good with paint to get us the exact color match going on. And when we do that, we'll spin up a new PCB for the new LEDs and change out the buttons and get everything looking just right. Finally, these side panels here look brilliant, but they're MDF, which means they're really heavy, and also they're not the original metal that they're supposed to be. Now, there is a patron who has a metal fab shop, and I'm definitely going to get them to help me out. They're going to help me out with making a new panel for the floppy drive for the genuine system, and I think I'm going to lean on them to make some new side panels here for this system. So if we get a new veneer on it, a new front panel, and new side panels for it, this thing will be almost picture perfect to how the original CPU4 systems were. But for VCF, I think this is gonna work perfectly. So the next step, or the next thing I wanna show you guys, is what's going on inside, because we had to make a ton of brackets. So let me pop this side panel off and we'll take a look inside. Real quick, for the side panel here, I was really going nuts about how to mount it to the side of the machine, but I just ended up cutting out some MDF hooks here that I was planning on nailing from the back side, but that was totally weak. So instead, good old L brackets, I pulled them out, screwed them in, and it seems to be working really well. The only problem is that I think my top panel has a bit of a warp or something to it because it actually hits in the back here when I'm trying to put it on. I should probably trim this up a little bit here. That'll make it a little easier to get on and off. But again, I'm running low on time, and since we're planning on replacing these with metal ones anyways, I think this is gonna work for now. On the inside here, it's mostly as we saw in the previous episode with the power supply mounted flat on the back here, which gives good access to the back of the back plane. There is some cable management going on here. I had a custom bracket that I used to cinch everything in, and then I used a zip tie to kind of get everything going in the right direction. And then these two cables go up to the front panel, and that seems to all be managed pretty well. And then we have the RS-232 serial cable coming from the MUX port back up to the terminal here. Since the terminal is going to live on top of the drive, that works out really well. The only other thing that I really added under here was some fans, which you saw me making up in the time lapse, and they just sit on kind of a tray that sits underneath the card cage here, and they'll be blowing up across the cards. And I think if I had it fully spec'd out with like 14 full cards in it, it would be inadequate, but for the 4 or 5 cards that are going to be in there, that should be plenty of cooling. You can also see how I mounted all of the different pieces. The vertical trim pieces here just have some brackets that I made with a little L bracket here in the center, and those are very rigid. I could actually probably wheel the entire thing around by grabbing that. The top panel here is just pushing down on some vertical pieces of MDF. So all of the weight is going straight into the frame. The brackets here are just location to prevent it from sliding off. So you can actually grab it from the top panel here and roll the whole thing around. It's plenty strong. The only weak part is the vinyl on top, which I already complained a bit about. I did paint this green instead of black because I had green paint, but really I just needed a dark color so that when somebody peers in through the little gap here on the side, they don't see something that's bright, and this hunter green color seemed to work just fine. Ideally that should be black, but I think it's going to be all right. Other than that, well, it's just a Centurion on the inside. We have our big hawk here that has been buttoned up with the top panel, and I put the panel on the bottom. So when we transport it, we'll have to pull the hawk drive out and the terminal off the top, and then we should be able to lift it into the back of the car. But man, that is the full Centurion. Let's plug it in and put some power into it. All right, so to fully boot this thing, all we gotta do is flip the master switch on the back. I actually haven't wired up the key switch, so it doesn't do anything at the moment. Then we gotta flip the main breaker for the hawk drive. That'll start the cooling fan. Then we'll turn our terminal on, and now at this point in time, the computer should be on. So if we hit this middle button here, this is the load OPSIS button, we should get a D equals prompt, which we do. That means the computer is waiting for the hawk drive to be spun up. So we start that by hitting the start stop button here. So now it's gonna start spinning up the drive. Then we gotta wait 50 seconds, that's how long its self-check cycle is, at which point it will load the heads, which is only the fixed platter. There are no heads for the removable platter. As a matter of fact, there's not even a removable platter in there, and we should get a ready light. When that ready light comes on, all we gotta do is type H1 and it will start booting into the system. It does 3 quick RTZs. We see it said LOS there. And now it's going to give us a prompt for the system disk. All we do is hit new line here. It's going to tell us what the previous system date was. The new system date, we'll just pick the same day, 08/23/84. We'll just hit enter on the time, which starts it at midnight. And when it says CRT0 ready, we are fully in the operating system. We can type .sta and view a status of the system. We can see that platter 1 is Usagi. That's our main platter. Platter 0 doesn't exist. The operating system is quite unhappy about that, but we knew that was gonna happen. We can see our total system RAM is 128K. That's because I only have 1 card in there. So this is a fully working Centurion system. We are in the operating system. We can look at the directory listing for the fixed platter here, and we can see it all works very fast. Now, there's a lot of questions from here, like what can we do with it? What kind of operating system is this? And well, I think we need to spin this down because it's super loud, and I want to answer some of those questions. The Centurion series is an incredibly long series that we've been working on. I mean, I've been working on, well, not this exact machine, but the Centurion in general for about 2 years now. And so there's a lot of stuff that we discovered along that 2-year journey and the 30 or so episodes that we've made up to this point that may not be exactly clear. It's sometimes really hard to figure out what exactly it is that I'm talking about when I film a new episode because I'm not really giving the proper context. And that leads to some people asking questions in the comments that, well, I think I want to take some time to address. What kind of CPU is in here? Is it a Z80 or a x86 compatible CPU, or maybe it even has some 6502 flavor in it? And the answer is it's none of those. It's a completely custom proprietary CPU that you will only find on the Centurion. Although it does have roots in an older CPU. Centurion started their company by essentially building a new computer for customers of Litton machines based around an Eldorado Electrodata EE200 CPU, which was a fully TTL-based CPU. It used 4 cards, and it had their own custom instruction set. Now, the CPU 6 that is in this machine and in the genuine machine over there is fully backwards compatible with that CPU 4 or that EE200 instruction set, but it also has a lot more new features. As a matter of fact, the instruction set is about double the size of that old EE200 instruction set, but it's still completely custom. It is not shared with any other CPU on the planet. What operating system does it use? Is it some flavor of CP/M, or did they borrow something from DEC or Digital? And the answer is none of that. It's, again, completely proprietary. This operating system was written from the ground up by John Rex Warren, and then after his untimely death, Jim McGee and a couple other programmers took over and evolved the operating system into the 7.13 version that we have here. And this is completely custom. It didn't borrow any code from anywhere else. It's only capable of running on Centurion hardware, partially because it was written in assembly for this CPU, and this CPU was, again, only used in this system, but also Centurion uses a very strange 400 bytes per sector as opposed to a more common 512 bytes per sector. So if you were to try and run this operating system on modern hardware, you run into that problem very quickly. Can it be overclocked? This is, I think, fascinating because we're always thinking about how to eke more performance out of anything, even if it's old vintage mini computer hardware. And I love this question. And I think the CPU 6 card could be overclocked a little bit. The CPU 6 is clocked at 5 megahertz, and we could push that faster by changing out the crystal or maybe the divider, but noise was already a problem on the multi-wire CPU 6 card at 5 megahertz. So I think if we push it up to 6 megahertz or 7 megahertz, we're gonna start getting noise or crosstalk or other problems that are gonna cause the CPU to either have intermittent problems or just not work flat out. There is a bigger issue though, and that is that the CPU interfacing with the RAM is based around the fact that the RAM is relatively slow. So you would have to build a completely new RAM board that deals with the hardware limitation of the wait states for delivering data to the CPU. And then you would have to overclock the CPU with a new crystal, and it creates a ton of problems. But that's not to say it's impossible. It's just not easy or likely to happen. In previous episodes, I talked about bringing this Hawk drive up, and I get a ton of comments of people saying, it's old hard drive. It should be super easy to emulate. And so why not just emulate it? I mean, it's just a 10 megabyte hard drive. We can emulate it like that with like a Raspberry Pi or something super simple, right? And the problem is that Everything on this hard drive is hardware based, and hardware, even in the 70s, was incredibly fast. Yes, it's only 10 megabytes. Yes, it only has a 2.5 megahertz byte clock on it, but there's a lot of really tricky timing transitions that happen at much faster intervals than that 2.5 megahertz byte clock. And these type of things were figured out with the hardware, and that is incredibly fast. If, for example, we want to emulate something that is transitioning at a speed of like, say, 5 megahertz or 10 megahertz, which seems really slow, if we want to emulate that with software, we have to start thinking about how many clock cycles does, for example, a Raspberry Pi or an Arduino take to accomplish one task. If we want it to turn this I/O pin off and then check a value coming in through this I/O pin within a very specific interval, well, maybe turning this I/O pin off takes 10 or 15 clock cycles, and then it needs to have another maybe 5 or 10 clock cycles to switch over to reading an input, and then it has maybe another 10 clock cycles to read that input coming in. And if the transition between that output and that input is something that happens at like, say, a rate of 10 megahertz, well, now we need to get, say, 20 or 25 clock cycles happening in that span right there. That's like 250 megahertz that we need to do it. So that's what I'm getting at, is that the hardware is hardware. There is no software layer there. It happens immediately, or as fast as the actual electrons can do it. But when we're talking about emulating the drive, now we throw in the problem of software. How difficult is it to get the software to perform at the same level as the instantaneous hardware in the drive? And it turns out that it's so difficult, it's beyond me. As a matter of fact, we have a team of people that are coming up with ideas about how to tackle this, and well, we have made some headway. It's actually much easier to just fix and maintain a real Hawk drive than it is to emulate one, which is one of the reasons why I'm doing this. It was easier for me to repair this than it was to figure out how to emulate this. But if you are a programming wizard and you know your way around FPGAs or microcontrollers in such a way that we should be able to do this quickly, hop over to the Discord, because we could use all the help we can get on emulating one of these, which is something that I want to do because they are wear items at the end of the day. There are pieces that are going to wear out, and there's no spare parts for these anymore. Can it be networked? And the answer is kind of a yes and no. No, it can't be networked in that it does not have a network card. There is no software capability for Ethernet networking or anything like that. However, it does have a multiplexer card. So if you can do something through RS-232, it is possible to connect it up to this machine. This was actually quite common with remote dialing into the system using an acoustic coupler. But that's not exactly networking. That's just kind of a remote terminal. Networking would be having this computer talk to another computer. And I just so happen to have 2 Centurions in this room, and that is something that we are definitely working on, trying to get one MUX to send files over to another MUX or vice versa. And we have, I think, cracked it for some certain types of files. Now, also, Centurion themselves were working on some way of getting this to talk to an IBM PC. We actually have some remnants of the software that was being developed for that, but it's incomplete and we're not entirely sure how that works. Can it run Doom? And the answer is no, of course not. It's a mini computer from the 80s based on an architecture from the 70s. It doesn't have a hope in hell of running Doom. But that's not to say that it's impossible to get some approximation of Doom running on this. First of all, something like Doom Roguelike would be perfect for this because we only have an ASCII terminal. So we can only deal with ASCII graphics. It has to essentially be text-based. Now, that's not to say that it's not impossible to build a video card for this, which is maybe a stretch goal of mine. Get some actual color graphics coming out of this by building a custom video card that slots into the back plane, but that requires a whole lot of custom software and things like that. But also, it's only an 8-bit processor. Doom was meant for something that was much faster with much more lane width going on there. But, well, somebody has gotten a 3D ray tracing running on a TI-99, which technically is a 16-bit processor, but it's been throttled down to essentially dealing with everything 8 bits at a time. And that's actually, performance-wise, a little slower than this, which means that it's possible that with the right programmer writing assembly for this machine, bare metal, we could get some 3D ray tracing going on. But again, we have to build a completely custom video card or graphics card that's based on probably an existing chip, maybe the TMS 9918 or whatever the video chip used in the TI is. So yes and no. Doom won't run. But that's not to say it's impossible. There is a chance there. So that was just a few questions. I hope I didn't ramble on too long, but this machine, like I said, is going to be at VCF. If you have more questions about it and you're going to be at the event, hunt me down. I'll be 6'4" tall, wearing an Usagi Electric shirt. Hunt me down, ask questions. We can get you working on it, actually using it, experiencing the machine in person. I think it's going to be a hit, and I'm super excited about it going. And I'm really relieved that we got it done in time. So I want to thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next episode.